There's a man standing in a warehouse, holding a microphone, about to make a video. It cost him about $4,500. He shot the whole thing in a single afternoon. There's a bear costume in it, a machete, a toddler, a joke about polio. And that video, that cheap, silly, one-day video, is going to be worth $1 billion. Watch him for a second, walking down that aisle. Behind him, shelves and shelves of razors, thousands of them. Neat little blades stacked all the way up. Here's the thing nobody tells you about that moment. Those razors behind him, they aren't his. He didn't make them. He couldn't make a razor if his life depended on it. They were made in a factory on the other side of the world by a company you've never heard of. And you, right now, tonight, could buy the exact same blades yourself for less than he's about to charge you. So sit with that, because it's stranger than it sounds. A man who makes nothing, selling a product that isn't his, is about to build a company that a giant corporation will pay $1 billion in cash to own. And that's the question this whole story turns on. If he didn't make the razors, if anyone could buy the same ones anywhere, then what exactly did that $1 billion buy? Because something here was worth a fortune. Something in that warehouse, in that video, in that man, was worth more than the factory, more than the blades, more than the whole thing put together. One of the largest consumer brands on earth looked at it and opened its checkbook. And then, and this is the part that stays with me, the moment they owned it, they killed it. Not on purpose. They'd never have spent $1 billion to destroy something. But within a few short years, the very thing they paid for was gone, faded, neutered. And the company that bought it would quietly write down almost $200 million, admit it hadn't worked, and sell what was left. They bought the one thing that mattered, and it was the one thing they broke. Now, you've probably seen a version of this story. Somebody made a video. $1 billion gone! The rise and fall. The startup that flew too close to the sun. But that's not what happened. Not really. The real story isn't about a razor company at all. It's about the strangest kind of value there is. The kind you can't hold, can't manufacture, can't put on a shelf. The kind that's almost impossible to buy and terrifyingly easy to destroy. And to understand it, we have to go back. Before the $1 billion, before the giant corporation, all the way back to a holiday party and a warehouse full of blades that nobody could sell. So stay with me. It starts with two men who barely knew each other, and a problem neither of them could fix alone. It starts at a holiday party at the end of 2010. Two men get to talking. One of them is named Michael Dubin. The other is named Mark Levine. They don't really know each other, a friend of a friend, the way these things usually go. And somewhere in that conversation, Levine mentions a problem he's been sitting on. He's got a warehouse, and in that warehouse, there are about 250,000 razors, imported, cheap, and he can't sell them. They're just sitting there, gathering dust, money frozen on a shelf. Now, most people hear that and feel sorry for the guy. Michael Dubin heard it and felt something else. Because Dubin had spent the last decade doing two things, and both of them were about to matter more than he knew. The first was marketing. He understood the internet back when most people selling things still didn't. But the second thing is the one that changes everything. For about 8 years, Michael Dubin had been studying comedy, improv, sketch, standing on small stages in New York, learning how to be funny on purpose. He wasn't a razor guy. He wasn't even really a business guy. He was, underneath it all, a performer. And that, hold on to that, is the whole story. Though nobody watching could have known it yet. Because here's what he understood that Levine didn't. The problem wasn't the razors. The razors were fine. The problem was that buying razors was miserable. You go to the store, they're locked in a plastic case like they're made of gold. Some poor employee has to come unlock it, and they cost a fortune for blades you could barely tell apart. Everybody hated it. Nobody said it out loud. And Dubin thought, what if somebody just said it out loud? What if buying razors could be easy and cheap and, this is the strange part, funny? So they built it. Over about 8 months, mostly out of Dubin's own place. A simple idea. Pay $1 a month and good razors show up at your door. No store, no locked case, no nonsense. And then, to launch it, Dubin did the thing only he could have done. He wrote a script. He called a friend from his comedy days to direct it, and in a single afternoon, for about $4,500, he made a video of himself walking through that warehouse, deadpan, saying things no company had ever said about itself. Are the blades any good? He asks. And then, without blinking, no, our blades are great. There's a bear. There's a machete. There's a line about his grandfather having one blade and polio. They put it online in March of 2012, and within 48 hours, 12,000 people had signed up. So many, so fast, that the website simply collapsed under the weight of them. Overnight, a man who made nothing, selling blades that weren't his, had a real company. But here's what I want you to notice. What made that video work wasn't the price. It wasn't the dollar. Plenty of things are cheap. What made it work was him. The timing, the deadpan, the nerve, the exact, specific, impossible-to-copy feeling of that one man being funny in that one way. He wasn't selling razors. He was never selling razors. He was selling a voice. His voice. And it would be years before anyone understood that, not the blades, not the subscription, not the website, was the only thing this company ever truly owned.
So the video worked. The orders poured in. And now the company had a different kind of problem. The good kind. It had to actually run. So let's slow down and ask the question almost nobody asks. How did this thing actually make money? On the surface, it's simple. You pay $1 a month, good razors show up. But $1 a month doesn't build a fortune. $1 barely covers the shipping. So where's the money? The dollar was never the point. The dollar was the door. Because once you're a member, once you've stopped thinking about razors at all because they just arrive, they start offering you the other things. A nicer blade, a few dollars more, shave butter, wipes, hair stuff. Little upgrades, quietly, month after month. You came in for $1, you stay for years. And every one of those years, you spend a little more. That's the machine. Get them in cheap. Keep them forever. That's where the money lives, not in the first sale, but in the customer who never leaves. It's a good machine, a clever one, and it worked. But now we have to talk about the part of this story that changes how you see all of it. The part that almost nobody who tells this story bothers to explain. Where did the razors come from? Because remember, Dubin didn't make them. He couldn't. He was a comedian with a warehouse. So who actually made the blades that this whole billion-dollar company was built on? The answer is a company called Dorco. You've probably never heard that name. Almost nobody has. And that's the whole point. Dorco is South Korean. It was founded in 1955, decades before Dubin was even born. It has spent 70 years doing one thing: making blades. Quietly, relentlessly. It made the world's first 6-blade razor, then the world's first 7-blade razor. It sells into more than 130 countries, and most of the people shaving with its blades all over the world have no idea the name exists. That's the razor Dollar Shave Club was selling, a Dorco blade with a new name on the box. And here's the part that should stop you cold. Those blades weren't a secret. They weren't locked away. You could go online right then, find the exact same Dorco razors, and buy them yourself, often for less than Dollar Shave Club was charging. Same blade, same factory, no middleman. So think about what that actually means. The product wasn't special. The product wasn't even theirs. Anyone with an internet connection could get the identical thing, cheaper, direct from the source. Which leaves us standing in front of a very strange, very important question. If the razors came from someone else, if anyone could buy them anywhere, then what did Dollar Shave Club actually own? What was left? What was the thing? What was the one piece of this whole operation that you couldn't just buy somewhere else for less? Hold that question, because a giant corporation is about to answer it by writing a check for $1 billion.
For a while, the thing just grew. The video that cost $4,500 kept working long after the first 48 hours. More members, then more. The money came in the way we talked about, cheap at the door, growing every year they stayed. And the people who fund these things noticed. The investors came, round after round. They poured in something like $160 million over a few years, betting that this little razor company was going to be big. By the end, before anyone bought it, the whole thing was valued at around $500 million. $500 million. For a company that made nothing, selling a blade you could buy yourself direct from Korea for less. And it kept climbing. By 2016, Dollar Shave Club had over 3 million members and was pulling in a couple $100 million a year. It had become something bigger than a company. It had become a feeling. The little guy, the funny one, the brand that beat the giants at their own game by refusing to take any of it seriously. Which is exactly when the giant came knocking. Its name is Unilever, and if you don't know it, you know it. It owns Dove and Hellmann's and 100 other things in your house right now. It is enormous. It is old. It is everything Dollar Shave Club spent 5 years making fun of. And in July of 2016, Unilever bought Dollar Shave Club for a reported $1 billion in cash. Let that number sit for a second, because it's genuinely strange. $1 billion for a company that year made maybe $225 million in sales and wasn't even turning a profit. They paid roughly 5 times the company's sales in cash up front for a business that made no money and made no razors. It was one of the biggest deals of its kind that had ever happened. So the obvious question is, why? Why would one of the most careful, most experienced consumer companies on earth pay $1 billion for a razor reseller that didn't own its own product? And here's the thing. They weren't stupid. They knew Dollar Shave Club didn't make the blades. They knew you could buy Dorco razors direct. They could read a balance sheet better than anyone. They weren't buying the razors. They knew the razors were nothing. They were buying the other thing. The thing we've been circling this whole time. The voice. The feeling. The 3 million people who didn't just buy razors from this company. They liked it. They laughed at it. They trusted it. In a category where everything is boring and identical, Dollar Shave Club had the one thing you cannot manufacture and cannot buy off a shelf. A personality people actually loved. That's what $1 billion was for. Not the blades. The soul. Unilever knew exactly what it was buying. What nobody saw coming, not the investors, not Dubin, maybe not even the people signing the check, was what they were about to do to it.
Here's the cruel thing about what happened next. Nobody did it on purpose. There was no villain, no bad decision you could point to and say, "There, that's the moment they ruined it." It was quieter than that, and somehow that makes it worse. Unilever had just paid $1 billion for a voice, for a feeling, for the one weird, funny, human thing that made this company worth owning. And then, slowly, without ever meaning to, they did the most natural thing a giant corporation can do. They made it corporate. Think about how that happens. You buy the funny little company, and now the funny little company has to answer to a very large, very serious one. There are processes now, approvals, brand guidelines, people in meetings asking whether that joke is really appropriate, whether that word is really on brand. Every one of those questions is reasonable, every single one. And together, one by one, they sand the edges off the exact thing you paid $1 billion for. The voice that could say, "Our blades are great." That specific nerve, that deadpan. You cannot keep that alive inside a machine built to remove risk. The two things can't share a room. And I'm not guessing at this. Years later, the man running Dollar Shave Club today said it out loud, plainly. He said Unilever took the voice out of the brand, that they made it too corporate, too safe. And when you do that, he said, you lose the customer. Now, I want to be fair, because the voice wasn't the only thing working against them. The truth is, part of the problem was simpler and colder than any of that. It turned out there are only so many people who want to buy razors on a subscription. The easy customers had already signed up, and the whole world that made this model cheap, the cheap ads, the quiet internet, was getting more expensive by the year. The business was going to get harder no matter who owned it. But Unilever made the hard thing harder. Because while they were busy sanding down the voice, they barely used the one advantage they actually had. This is a company with shelves in every store on Earth, and it took them until 2020 to really put Dollar Shave Club in stores. 4 years. And in those 4 years, watch who walked past them. Harry's, the other guys. Born the same way, around the same time, selling almost the same thing.
But Harry's did the thing Dollar Shave Club didn't. It got into Target early. It bought its own factory, so it actually owned its product. While the billion-dollar brand sat still, being made safe, its twin quietly took the shelf space, the ground, the future. The little company that had been so fast, so sharp, so alive. Under its giant new owner, it became slow, careful, quiet, ordinary. Everything it had once made fun of. And eventually, the giant did the math. In 2022, Unilever admitted the truth in the only language a corporation really speaks. They wrote down the value of Dollar Shave Club by around $192 million. An accountant's way of saying, this is worth far less than we paid. And then, in 2023, they let it go. They sold Dollar Shave Club to a private equity firm, keeping just a minority piece, quietly stepping away from the billion-dollar bet that hadn't worked. 7 years, $1 billion in, and then handed off, diminished, for a fraction of what it cost. So there it is, the rise and the fall. The funny little company that flew too high and came back down to earth. The end. Except that's not the end, because there's one more question buried in all of this. And when you ask it, the whole story turns inside out. Was this actually a failure?
Was this actually a failure? Because look again at who was standing where when the music stopped. Michael Dubin, the comedian with a warehouse full of other people's razors, walked away from that deal with a reported $90 million. The investors who backed him early, the ones who believed before there was anything to believe in, one of them reportedly made 10 times their money, 10 times, on a company that made nothing. They didn't fail. They won. Completely. They took a commodity anyone could buy, wrapped it in a voice, and sold that voice at the very top of the market, in cash, to a giant, and then walked out the door before the whole thing cooled. Think about the timing of it. They sold in 2016, right at the peak, right before the ground shifted. Because the thing that made Dollar Shave Club possible, cheap ways to reach people online, a sleepy competitor, a moment when the internet was still a bargain, that window was quietly closing. The cost of finding new customers was about to climb. The easy years were about to end. And they got out first, with the cash, before the tide went out. So here's the question that flips the whole story. We've been calling this the fall of Dollar Shave Club. But the people who built it are rich. The people who backed it are rich. The only one who lost, the only one, is the giant who bought it. So who really failed here? Now hold that thought, because it connects to the deepest part of all of this. The part we've been building toward since the very first minute. Remember the question we couldn't answer? If they didn't make the razors, if anyone could buy the same blades from Dorco, direct, for less, then what did Dollar Shave Club actually own? Now you know. There was only ever one answer. The voice. The personality. The feeling. That was the entire asset. That was the only thing in the whole company that you couldn't get somewhere else for less. Not the blades, those were Korean, and they were everyone's. The voice was the moat. The voice was the $1 billion. And here's the terrible symmetry of it. The one thing they owned is the one thing the new owner destroyed. Unilever paid a fortune for the single asset that made the company special. And then, by making it corporate, erased exactly that asset. They bought the voice, and they killed the voice. And what they were left holding was the part that was never really theirs to begin with. A subscription, and a Korean blade you could buy yourself. They paid $1 billion for the soul of the thing. And then they removed the soul. And then they seemed surprised that what remained was just a body. So was it genius, or was it a tragedy? And here's the uncomfortable answer. It was both at the same time, depending entirely on where you were standing. For the founder, genius. For the giant, a slow, expensive lesson. And for the voice itself, the actual thing of value, it was simply a death. Bought and then quietly put to sleep by people who never understood that it was the only thing they'd purchased.
So let me tell you why I told you all of this. Because it was never really about razors. You knew that by now. It's about a strange kind of value, the kind you can't hold in your hand. Everything solid in this story turned out to be worthless. The blades? Anyone's. Made in Korea, sold to the world, no secret at all. The subscription? Clever, but easy to copy. The website, the warehouse, the little boxes on the doorstep. None of it was worth $1 billion. None of it was even really theirs. The only thing worth anything was the one thing you couldn't see. The sense that somewhere behind this company was a real person, being honest and funny in a world of things that were neither. You can't manufacture that. You can't buy it off a shelf in Korea. And it turned out to be worth more than the factory, more than the product, more than everything you could actually touch combined. And here's where it turns, quietly, into something bigger. Because that kind of value, the invisible kind, is safe only as long as the people holding it can see it. Unilever couldn't. Not because they were fools, because they were careful and serious and trained to trust what shows up on a page. And the most valuable thing they'd ever bought never showed up on a page at all. So they smoothed it, and they softened it, and they optimized it, the way you'd tidy a room without knowing there was something alive in it. Until one day, it simply wasn't there anymore. You don't protect what you can't see. That's the whole thing. That's the whole story. And once you notice it, you start seeing it everywhere. How many of the things you love, the brands, the shows, the little companies with a spark to them, are really just one person's nerve sitting on top of a product anyone could make? And how many of them are one new owner away from having that spark tidied out of them, until all that's left is the part that was never the point? Dollar Shave Club is still out there, by the way. New owners, right now, trying to find that old spark again, to sound like a person again. Which tells you something worth sitting with. It's a lot easier to buy one of these things than to build one. And it's a lot easier to break one than to bring it back. So I'll leave you with the question I keep turning over. And I mean it. Tell me what you think. Was this the fall of Dollar Shave Club? Or was it the greatest exit of the decade? And Unilever just paid the bill? And the harder one, the one I actually want you to sit with. How many of the things you love are really just one person's voice on top of somebody else's blade? Tell me. I'll be reading.